Well, folks, once again, welcome back to my YouTube channel, Captain Boat Builder. Glad to have you back. And today's episode, number 17, is just entitled Varnish. And that's because since the last video, that's pretty much all I've been doing, is varnishing and sanding over and over again. And when it comes to varnish on a boat, you find generally two schools of thought. Some people love it, and some people hate it. And for the people who hate varnish and hate to do the work, fortunately, an awful lot of new boats are built today with no exterior bright work at all. And maybe there's nice varnish work in the cabin, but nothing outside. And so they're saved from all that work and maintenance. For other people, they can't get enough varnish. There are even people that varnish the outside of the hull. So I just happen to be in the school of thought that I really like varnish. I started doing it when I was a young boy, learned most of what I know from my father, picked up some tips from people along the way, watched some videos, and sort of developed my own technique. And that's kind of what happens to a lot of people. Since there are so many different ways to varnish, there are different sandpapers to use, different kinds of abrasives, there are different kinds of varnish, different colors, different glosses, there are different ways to apply it, different types of brushes. I prefer the foam brush myself. I used China bristle brushes for years, and now I've sort of switched over to the foam brush, especially in a small boat. I think they're much easier to control. So what you'll find as you start into the varnish and work on your own technique, that you'll figure out the way you like to do it, and that's the most important part. I did want to show you the type of varnish that I've been using. This is Interlux Schooner Varnish, number 96. This is a very traditional varnish, both in terms of consistency and application, and also in color. It's a rich amber color, sort of like dilute maple syrup. Gives you a nice amber tint. For those of you who want a perfectly clear finish on top of your epoxy, this traditional schooner varnish is probably not the right product. You'll want a varnish that's more clear. This is also the type of varnish used and recommended by Chesapeake Lightcraft. This is what I've been using. I also wanted to mention again the sanding of the varnish. I've gotten to the point where I'm using 320 paper, and even with that, I'm finding that the scratch marks from the sandpaper itself are visible. And so I've been finishing that off with the Scotchgard green abrasive cloth, which is approximately 600 grit. And even with that, if you get the exact right light and glare, you can see the fine scratches. So it's something to consider, how fine you want to go on the sandpaper or the abrasive, how concerned you are about these tiny little scratches that can show up through the varnish. If you get the light and the glare just exactly right, you can just barely see them. So that's a consideration. I have really enjoyed this phase of the boat building. Except for a few more coats here and there, I'm almost completely finished. So I hope you enjoy this video, and I hope you enjoy seeing the fruits of my labor, and hopefully as you continue your build, you'll see the fruits of your own labor. So thanks again for watching. Again, leave me a comment, ask me a question, that would be fine. Again, I hope you enjoy the video. So here's the boat after about 4 hours of hand sanding. And you'll notice that I've only sanded, right here, I've only sanded the number 1 plank and the number 2 plank. The other planks, 3, 4, and 5, are not sanded because I'm not going to do those right now. I've decided to do the boat, the varnish, in 3 phases. I'm going to work on the bottom, the flat sections, planks 1 and 2, and then my plan, and all this is to avoid drips, I'm going to roll the boat up on its side like this, almost like this, so that I can work on planks 3, 4, and 5 in more of a horizontal position than vertical, so I don't have to worry so much about the varnish running I want to do it as smoothly as possible. But again, this is just the beginning. 4 hours of sanding, and I've also sanded the end pieces, the bulkheads, in the flotation compartment. So I'm going to put the first coat of varnish on, and we'll see how it turns out here. So this is the first coat of varnish. It's still wet. I think I've achieved what I'm trying to achieve. I wanted it to look like a layer of water in the boat. I wanted it to be very shiny, very slick. I wanted it to look like there was water in the boat. So I'm happy with the first coat. There are going to be a lot more, and even tiny little imperfections that I can see should eventually be filled up with varnish and should be very smooth. So this is the first coat, just on planks 1 and 2. Well, after I got the first coat of varnish onto the center planks 1 and 2, now I'm working on what I would call the side planks, or the side strakes 3, 4, and 5. You may notice here, you can see there's fresh varnish on them right now. Also, back up here just a little bit, I've got the boat set up almost on its side. And you can see from the position of the chair that I've got that it allows you to do most of the sanding and the varnishing on the side strakes on the inside, 3, 4, and 5, from the sitting position, which is, boy, it's a lot easier on your back. And I've just propped the boat up here on the sawhorses, just using 2x4s and some clamps and a little bit of foam. And it seems to be pretty secure, and it's easy to adjust, sort of just held in place with the green tape, which doesn't look like much, but it's actually quite strong. So this is how I'm taking care of the side strakes on the inside, so I have to worry less about the varnish running and sagging, because it's getting closer to doing it on the horizontal instead of the vertical. I'll do the other side, and I'll be back with you in a little while. Okay folks, just another little update. What you're looking at now is fresh varnish on the center planks, number 1, and the first plank up the side, the number 2 planks. And I know this is just starting to look like the same old thing that we just looked at in the last tiny segment, but what I'm doing here is I'm varnishing the center section relatively flat, so I don't have to worry about drips and runs. And what I have found is that after about 4 or 5 hours, the varnish sets up enough so that it won't drip or run. And so what I'm going to do now is in another 4 or 5 hours, I'm going to carefully rotate the boat back to the way it was so that I can do the strakes 3, 4, and 5. You see that they're all sanded, all prepared for the second coat. And what I'm finding is after you get the initial sanding done with some sandpaper, in between coats, if you use the Scotch Brite green pad, which is roughly equivalent to 600 grit, you get a beautiful surface. It's scuffed up just enough so you can see where you've been, and you don't have to worry about taking too much of the varnish off. So I'll have another little shot for you after I rotate it, and then it'll be almost half done. Well, I'm back with you again. Now you can see here on planks 3, 4, and 5, I've got the second coat of varnish on. And you can see how I've rotated the boat over onto its side. This seems to work pretty well because I'm not having much problem at all with the varnish running, because as I do it in sections, it's mostly flat. I was a little bit wrong. It looks like, you may recall earlier this morning I did the bottom and plank number 1. And it looks like after the varnish sits for a couple of hours, maybe 2, it won't run. So you don't have to wait 4 or 5 hours before you rotate the boat. And so this way, in one day, you can get a coat on the bottom and a coat on the side, just by rotating the boat. And that way you're always working in a relatively flat position with the varnish. So you have much better luck with the running and the dripping. So it looks like I'll be going for 6 or 7 coats. Believe me, I'll try not to bore you too much, and I certainly don't need to show you each coat. But I will have a little shot when I'm finished, and I'll also be working on the little deck pieces here and also the railings. One thing I wanted to mention is when the boat's rolled over on its side like this, this is a really good time to get varnish on the back underside of the railing. It's very easy that way, and it doesn't run. So that's the message here. Don't let the varnish run. Okay, that's pretty much the technique that I'm using, and when I get to the 6 or 7 coat steps in the process, after I've had that much varnish on, I'll be pretty close to the end and I'll show it to you then. Well folks, I just wanted to show you just a little bit more of the varnish. If you look here at planks 3, 4, and 5, that's 5 coats of varnish. I'm going to have 5 coats on the other side. Probably have 6 or 7 on the bottom. And then when we get to the little deck pieces here, you can see that the varnish is starting to get a nice buildup along with the rails. So essentially the boat is finished, except for just a few more finish coats of varnish and trying to get it as smooth as possible. This is pretty much what the inside of the boat is going to look like. I'm pleased with the work. The varnish has turned out just fine. It's been very slow, as you can imagine. And looking ahead, this should be the last video except for 2 more that I will have. The next video after this one will be what I call lessons learned. And in addition to the things that I tried to point out while I was building the boat, I've gone back and reviewed each episode to see if there was something that I left out, something that might help you in your construction of the Sassafras 12 or a similar boat. And then after the lessons learned video, the last video in the series will be the launching. We're having a big party at a friend's house on a small lake. Looking forward to that, looking forward to putting the boat in the water. So we're coming up on the last 2 videos, the last one being the launching. Hope you've enjoyed this endless varnishing. I'm quite pleased with the result. And I'll be back with you soon for lessons learned. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.